Hey there, Giants fans. Daryl Slater here with Bob Brookover. Welcome to the latest episode of our Talk is Cheap Giants podcast from NJ Advanced Media, the Star Ledger, NJ.com. Well, I mean, we'll just start with this 5-1. I mean, 5-1. The Giants are 5-1. And it just bears repeating, the 5-1. It's really hard you have to say it a few times to really come to grips with that. The Giants won their third straight game yesterday. They beat the Ravens. They come back from down 10 points in the fourth quarter. Their third straight victory overall, their third comeback win out of 5 this year, in which they trailed by at least 10 points. And they, of course, the second straight week in which they overcame a double-digit point deficit after the London game. So there's just so many ways to wrap your head around how surprising this Giants season has been. They are now, if you look at it, more than a third of the way through their 17-game regular season, and they are very much in the thick of the playoff race, very much in the thick of the NFC East race behind the undefeated Eagles. They're currently the 5th seed in the top wild card in the NFC. And really, this is the Giants had a schedule here where there were a couple winnable games early on, Bears, Panthers, but now they have won 3 games, Titans, Packers, Ravens, that they were not expected to win. And as you look forward here, the schedule, let's be honest, it's favorable. They do have to go play in Jacksonville and Seattle the next 2 weeks before their bye. The Giants are 2-0 on the road, one of 3 undefeated road teams in the league, along with the Jets and Eagles. And then after the bye, they get a couple winnable home games against Houston and Detroit. So not only is the start giving them some wiggle room, which is the word we used last week, but they are in the thick of this. And at this point, they are shockingly very much in the mix to make the playoffs. And nobody expected that from Brian Daboll's first team. So, Bob, I guess as we look at this from like the broadest view possible, 6 games into a 17-game regular season for the Giants to have 5 wins, I don't even know what the odds of that would have been. 2%, 3%, 5%?
All I know is I picked him to win 5 games, and I was right. They've won 5. It's been quite a thing to watch. I mean, it's a team that you can't knock them out. You can wobble them, you can knock them down. They get up, put them down by double digits. First half, fourth quarter, it doesn't matter. They get up and they find a way to win. I mean, the only game they didn't do that was against Dallas, and Dallas is a pretty good team, I think. Even though Dallas lost to the Eagles last night, I think they showed that they're a pretty good team by being down 20-0 and coming back and rallying. But unlike the Giants, they couldn't finish. I mean, yesterday might have been the best of their 5 wins. Because I do think the Ravens are a good team. I think the Ravens are probably better than the Packers. And have things gone their way? Yeah, Justin Tucker missed a field goal. I know it was 56 yards, but that's like a 36-yarder for Justin Tucker. He hits him from everywhere. He never misses, but he hits the upright. Right at the time they needed a turnover, Lamar Jackson makes a boneheaded play after messing up the snap. And there it is. The game's there for the Giants to win, and they win it. We've been witnessing it week after week for 6 straight weeks. Somebody asked John Feliciano yesterday, I think, when do you go from being, the Giants, they're this team, they're this lucky team, to, hey, they're a good team. I'm there. They're a good team.
Yeah, they are. I mean, there's no talking around it now. I mean, they've won 3 games against teams that were expected to be either pretty good or very good. And the Giants are sitting here now, one of 3 5-1 teams in the NFL, along with the Bills and Vikings. And of course, the Eagles at 6-0. And yeah, I mean, so here's what good teams do, I think. And they seize opportunities. And that's why the Giants weren't able to win so many close games in recent years. I mean, this team was 22-59 over the last 5 years. Largely because they weren't able to seize opportunities in close, and do things like the Giants did yesterday. So obviously you see the Ravens go down the field. They go up 20-10 early in the fourth quarter on that 75-yard touchdown drive. What do the Giants do? They answer right back with 75-yard touchdown drive of their own. So, while that didn't put them over the top, obviously, that kept them in it. They would not have won that game without that 75-yard touchdown drive from their offense. And that kept the pressure on Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. Of course, yeah, Jackson makes the really bad, ill-advised throw. Julian Love is there, makes the interception, and a great effort for him to return that 27 yards, setting up a gimme go-ahead touchdown drive. And then, of course, the Giants are able to finish it out with a Kayvon Thibodeau strip sack at the end. And so on a day when Wink Martindale's defense was not great for the most part through three plus quarters, they locked it down on those final two Ravens drives. And so that's what good teams do. They seize opportunities when their opponent makes a mistake and gives them some wiggle room, and they can close out a win. And that's what the Giants did yesterday. And they are a well-coached team with obviously a still flawed roster. But, that's impressive to me because those are the things that are going to be a big part of this next step for the Giants as they maybe finally deliver some results in their rebuilding process.
They're also a team that just defies statistics. The Julian Love interception, their first interception of the year.
Yep.
6 games in, they get their first interception. It becomes a huge one for them. Daniel Jones was having just an okay game. He had that good second quarter drive after, again, they needed him to answer after they go down 7-0. He immediately answers. But up until that point where they're down 20-10, nothing real spectacular from Daniel Jones. That drive, he goes 5 for 5, 57 yards. He has a third, I think it was a 3rd and 12 play. He finds Wan'Dale Robinson for 15 yards. Or it might have been a 2nd and 12, but whatever. Every time they've needed Daniel Jones to come up big, he has. Let's go to Saquon Barkley. Team shut him down in the first half. He does nothing in the first half. The Giants keep giving him the football. He comes out in the second half and just makes the plays needed to be made, scores a game-winning touchdown again. You have so many guys on this team playing hurt. The Feliciano was one yesterday. It was obvious at the end of that game that Barkley's shoulder was hurting him. He came out for a play and then went back in for scoring the winning touchdown. They defy statistics, but they define chemistry. I mean, it's all right there.
And it's sort of a mindset now that is building and snowballing on itself because this is a team that really did not necessarily have the belief it could win in recent years. And honestly, that's like self-perpetuating. I mean, so you look at this team, they won 4 games last year, then 6, 4, 5, and 3, going back to 2017. So they have not, the history has been terrible here in recent years. And now you see 6 games in, a 5-1 team, and as Leonard Williams said it for the game, I was like, how do you process this? How do you He's like, the best thing to do is to not even try. Just keep rolling. Just keep your head down and don't even try to think about why is this happening? Because, but the fact that it is happening is giving this team a sense of defiance, a sense of true belief, even when they're in tough spots. I mean, yes, they came back from down 13 in Nashville in week 1. That was in the second quarter of that deficit. They were down 14 to the Packers in London. That was in the second quarter of that deficit. But look, I mean, the Giants in this game, they trailed by 10 points until about 6 minutes remained in the entire game. So this to me was their most impressive comeback because of how sudden it was. And talked to O'Shane Ximines after the game, and I'll read you the quote. I will sanitize it here. He said, we could have said F it and laid down, but we kept fighting. We don't care what happens. If we're up, down, winning, losing, we're just going to bust your ass on the next play. I guess I can say the A word on here.
You can say ass.
Yeah, because we wrote it. And then
did.
then Ximines continues, we don't give an F if they bust one 59 yards, get the mother effer down, and we're going to play the next play. Wow. I mean, so first of all, the context of that is that O'Shane Ximines is like the quietest, most laid back guy who's actually generally just a very bland interview. But obviously everyone in that locker room is imbued with a sense of just defiance, clearly, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can see. I had read your story. I read it this morning, and I just busted out when I saw those quotes. They were so unlike O'Shane. But those guys, their profession is spend all week getting ready to play Sunday, and on Sunday, from the head coach on down, we see all the emotions come out. And when you win a game, they come out big time. That's talk about. Feliciano was talking about when they were down 20-10 on the sideline. He's saying you could see the red faced Daboll just you know I said, well, what was he saying? He said, I can't tell you what he's saying, but he was saying it in that old Dable way and it just you could tell he wanted us to be urgent. So it's a fiery team on Sundays. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, no, and I think people see Brian Daboll in his press conferences, and he's pretty bland, very bland.
Extremely
Doesn't
bland. Even
doesn't
after
really.
even in his press conference yesterday, he was pretty bland and not willing to share much, even about like the clock running zero before on that touchdown that made it 20-10. 10 guys on the field. He was pretty bland about all of that. But if you look at him on the sideline after they win, how happy he was for Wink Martindale. You know, he has that. He was schooled by Bill Belichick in terms of quotes, but he's unable to hide that fiery persona on Sundays.
Exactly. I was thinking that same thing. Like, whereas Belichick is very stone faced on the sideline, pretty much no matter what. I mean, you've seen these past couple weeks where it has just come out of Brian Dable after the game, just an emotional release. And of course, these last two games have been very emotional down the stretch as the Giants have overcome deficits against really probably the two best teams on their schedule, right up there with the Cowboys so far. So, just another remarkable win on so many levels for the Giants, and they got contributions not only from Daniel Jones in a big spot, as you alluded to, not only from Saquon Barkley, but from a couple young guys, and I think we could touch on that a little bit. Wandale Robinson and Kayvon Thibodeau. Of course, Thibodeau with the strip sack at the end, and Thibodeau crying tears of joy after that. And you wrote a little bit about Wandale Robinson today. First game back from his knee injury. He hadn't really done anything this year because he got hurt in week one. And you saw glimpses yesterday of how dynamic this kid can be to help, the Giants offense that very badly needs a dynamic receiver.
Yeah, I mean they badly need an explosive guy, and if you go back and look at his three catches, the touchdown catch he got help from a pick from David Sills, and that was a big play there, obviously. But the other two catches for first downs, he and all through. Well, first a touchdown is a first down too. So all four of his catches have been for first downs. But if you look at his other two for first downs, yesterday, he had separation. I mean, the throw before the touchdown that Daniel Jones made was an easy one because he had planted his feet and made a cut on Kyle Hamilton, the Ravens' first round pick safety out of Notre Dame, and he had burned him pretty much and had three yard separation. It was a really easy throw for him to make. I think he averaged 13.5 per catch yesterday. The Giants don't have anybody like that. Darius Slayton has had that in the past, but not really for a while. It was an exciting thing for the kid, and you had to be happy for the kid too. His family was there. He said his mother, it was the first time she had been up to North Jersey since he was drafted. He obviously has a very close relationship with his mother. He was talking about how he was going to give the football to her after the game, and he couldn't wait. And admitted it was going to be an emotional moment for him because she had raised him since he was 5 by herself, and meant the world to him. So he was a pretty cool story yesterday. And to a man, the Giants on offense, Daniel Jones, Feliciano, some others, Tyrod Taylor, all talked about how he can be a real big influence in this offense if he can stay healthy and get going here. And there's no reason to think he can't stay healthy. He said it was the first time in his life he really had missed more than a week of games in his life. So hopefully he does stay healthy for the Giants' sake because he's a difference maker.
Yeah, and then that's the thing with him. I mean, you look at him; he's a very small guy, and so durability is going to be something that he'll have to continue to show he can have throughout his time in the NFL, because he does have the ability, when he is healthy and out there, to create that separation with his speed, his elusiveness. And that's why the Giants drafted this kid in the second round just 1 year after drafting a guy in Kadarius Toney who looks like an absolute bust right now. And so they're going to be moving on surely from Sterling Shepard after this season, and we'll see what becomes of the Kadarius Toney saga. But Wan'Dale Robinson very clearly is a guy who could potentially be a foundational player for this Giants offense. Because look, I mean, when they drafted him round two, the Giants did. People looked at it and said, "Geez, this is a weird pick. He's kind of a gadget guy. He's perhaps redundant with Tony." But as it turns out, Tony hasn't done jack squat this year, just like last year. And here's Wan'Dale Robinson seizing his opportunity now that he's back from his knee injury that sidelined him since really midway through that. He only played, I think, 9 snaps in the Titans game. He didn't play that much in week 1, which was a bummer for him because it's close to home. He's from Kentucky. His family came to that game, but obviously a great moment for him with family in attendance yesterday at MetLife Stadium. And so, yeah, I mean, I think we're just real quick I mentioned Thibodeau, and everyone saw what happened. Everyone read about him, crying after the game, and an emotional guy, obviously. But I think the thing to remember with Thibodeau, and before we can touch real quick on the Giants defense here after this, but it's not like he had been really bad or anything in his previous 3 games. He had been affecting the quarterback. I mean, he had 4 pressures each of the 2 previous games, and PFF had graded him pretty well. But obviously the strip sack takes it to another level, and we'll see where he goes from here. But obviously he's a guy who they think can be a dominant edge rusher, which they've been looking for, and which this defense has missed for a while. How big do you see that being for Thibodeau, having gotten off the Schneid? What's the term? He got his first sack.
Schneid's great.
Yeah.
He, they need pass rushers. It looked like Aziz Ojulari was going to provide that for a little bit. When he was in there, I thought he was giving some pressure too. O'Shane has provided some of that. Ward has been, the other outside linebacker for them, has been more of a difference in a run making role when he was early in that game yesterday. He had another tackle for loss. I think he leads the team in that role. Him and Dexter Lawrence. But yeah, I mean, pass rushers take time. I mean, they're like offensive left tackles, quarterbacks. It takes time for them to hone their craft and become, the dominant. There are exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, the guy that comes to me, and the New York people hate me for making another Philadelphia reference here, but Brandon Graham was considered a bust 2 years into his Eagles career, and here we are, I think 11 or 12 years into his career now, and considered, he's going to go into the Eagles Hall of Fame someday. I don't know if he's going to go into the Hall of Fame, but he's an icon in Philadelphia now, but it took him time to get there. It took him some time to get there. And before we move on to the defense, we should also mention Daniel Bellinger, who's become a vital
Sure.
part of this offense. The 4 rookies, the rookies have kind of gone into 2 different categories: the guys who are hurt and done for the year, and the other guys who are contributing to this team, which is, it. Even though they're 5-1, this was supposed to still be a rebuilding year, and for the long term, there could be nothing better than the Giants having 4 rookies really making huge contributions right now.
Yeah, and as we talking about huge contributions, as you were mentioning that, I called up the snap counts from yesterday's game, and the Giants offense played 65 snaps, and Daniel Bellinger was on the field for 61 of those. I mean, that's a pretty darn big workload. Wan'Dale Robinson just 15 snaps of the 65, but obviously made a big impact in those snaps. And then of course the other guys, we were talking about the edge rushers there. Thibodeau played 49 of 59. And then we mentioned Ward and Zimenez. Zimenez got 33 and Ward 27, so they kind of split the Ojulari workload there. But yeah, I mean, Daniel Bellinger has clearly, he's a guy who clearly was the number 1 tight end coming out of the spring. But you wondered, like, okay, like what can they reasonably expect from this guy? Because they had signed Ricky Seals-Jones in the offseason. Obviously, he wound up doing nothing and was essentially cut. So the Bellinger clearly was his job from minute one, but could he make a difference? And you've seen so far, like absolutely. I mean, he had that Philly special-ish type play for the touchdown against the Packers, and then another good game for him yesterday. 5 targets, 5 catches, 38 yards, and a touchdown. And so the touchdown, of course, on that 8-yard pass from Jones on the 75-yard drive that pulled the Giants within 20-17. So yeah, I mean, they're getting, like you said, contributions from. If you look at the guys who are hurt rookie wise, it's really the back end of their rookie class, right? I mean, Marcus McKeith and Darian Beavers, who Beavers would have played a significant role, but
Right.
they've been fortunate that their top end rookies have
Right. I forgot
uh,
to mention Dane Belton has been a contributor
yeah,
too, for sure.
for the most part, other than Cordell Flott, their top end rookies have been able to stay pretty darn healthy, which I think has been obviously huge because they were going to rely on those guys all along.
Absolutely. I mean, and that ultimately it's going to be the story of the long term for this team is did they draft well this year? And, the early returns are good.
I think so, yeah. And in terms of the early returns yesterday for Wink Martindale's defense, I mean, geez, not great. I mean, after I looked at through my binoculars at him after the Ravens got that 75-yard touchdown drive to go up 20-10 with 12:54 left in the game. At that point, that was the seventh Ravens drive, and the Giants had forced just 2 punts. They had allowed 395 yards. They had no answer for Kenyon Drake, Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson, and Wink Martindale was there on the sideline, his arms crossed, staring out with expressionless face toward the field. And interestingly enough, he basically had no reaction or expression after the interception by Julian Love either. He was very stoic on the sideline as usual. But it did look like the Ravens were going to get one over on him, their former defensive coordinator there in Wink Martindale. But the last 2 drives, the turnover by Love, the takeaway, the pick, and then the Thibodeau strip sack. And you talk about like how disruptive the defense had been. And it really hadn't been, right? Because I mean, like you said, just they had 6 takeaways in the first 5 games, and all of them were fumble recoveries, and 3 of those were against the Bears, who were dreadful. So they really hadn't done a ton takeaway wise. But then you see those 2 big ones late in the game, and I mean, like Wing Martindale's going to downplay it, but like let's be honest, that was a huge emotional win for him yesterday.
No, I don't. It was funny when I went to Baltimore last week and talked to a couple of his former players, and I said, what's this game going to mean to him? Oh, he's circling this on the count. He said, I guarantee you, Patrick Queen, their linebacker said, I guarantee you the day he went to the Giants, he circled this game on his calendar, and I guarantee he did. I mean, he can say whatever he wants, but when you beat your former team that you were there for 10 years, he talked about his kids. His kids are still there. His granddaughter's there, and he FaceTimes with her. When you have that going, it's got to be a special day. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You can say whatever you want. You can say all the right things, but at the end of the day, it's a huge emotional win for him.
Okay, let's be honest. I mean, these guys are all competitive, and he's very competitive, and I'm sure John Harbaugh is still a close friend for him, holds him in high regard. I mean, he owes John Harbaugh a lot. But look, if John Harbaugh wanted Wink Martindale to still be the Ravens defensive coordinator, he would still be the Ravens defensive coordinator. I
Right,
mean,
and the interesting thing about it is he replaced him with his, somebody that Wink mentored. They brought back Mike McDonald, who had gone to Michigan for a year to be the defensive coordinator, and they brought him back to Baltimore. And the best I can tell, nobody really wants to talk about it, is that they felt like Wink blitzed too much, especially last year when the Ravens were really down some cornerbacks. Marcus Peters was hurt, and now for pretty much the year, and they felt like he was still blitzing too much. That's the best I could tell from the whole thing. I don't know. The Giants have had their share of injuries in the secondary. They were without 2 starting cornerbacks in the second half last week against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, and they figured out a way not to give up any points. And Wink was still blitzing. So, and I do believe Wink Martindale when he says, I was happy and excited about a new opportunity. And, it does give him a chance to show, hey, you know what? I'm not about the Baltimore Ravens program. I have a system that will work wherever I go. And in order for that if he ever is going to be a head coach, an owner has to look at him and say, "Oh yeah, I want Wink Martindale's system to be to be what leads my team, to the level it wants to get to."
And interesting, you brought up Mike McDonald and the replacement there for Wink Martindale. The Ravens had actually had 11 takeaways through the first 5 weeks of the season, which was tied for the NFL lead, while the Giants at 6 were like 19th. And the blitz stuff is and like the notion of like being married to the blitz or being too stubborn with blitzing a lot. That was a big storyline coming into this game, and I wrote about it for Saturday because Lamar Jackson had been really good against the blitz this year. Not so much last year, but really good through 5 weeks this year when teams were blitzing him. And so that became the question, like to blitz or not to blitz. What would Wink Martindale do? And so the PFF numbers are out. And I mean, I think everyone kind of saw this yesterday, but so Lamar Jackson had 36 dropbacks in that game. Wink Martindale blitzed them on 23 of those 36 dropbacks. And of course, the interception being one, the fumble, another one. And if you just look at the results are just jarring in terms of what his now. Granted, he threw for 121 yards when he was blitzed, but he was blitzed on a lot of plays, and including the interception. So he had a 45 PFF grade when he was blitzed and a 77.6 when he was not blitzed. So like just he was much better yesterday when he was not blitzed. Whereas, before that, he had handled the blitz pretty well, and the Ravens' pass protection had handled it pretty well. But as it turned out, the blitz got to him. The blitz got to him. They blitzed him. Wink Martindale blitzed him a ton. That's the most, and I know this because I looked up these numbers last week. That is by far the most Wink Martindale has blitzed an opposing quarterback this year. 64% of the snaps. I think the
They
previous,
were at like 43% coming in, right, for the
yeah, I
season.
mean, as a team, they were at 43, like totality wise, number one in the league for the year. But I think in individual games, the most they had done it was like mid 50s, and that was Justin Fields. So they went after Lamar Jackson and they said, "We're coming after you. Go ahead and try to beat this blitz." And he didn't do it. And so, how rewarding does that have to be for Wink Martindale? I mean, he's got to be, floating this week. And I'll
Like
resist. I'll
like
resist the
Popeye
joke about.
says, "I am what I am."
Yeah, I'll resist the joke about how easy or hard it would be for him to float. Big guy, big guy. But so let's look ahead. I mean, the thumbnail sketch of it here is at Jaguars, at Seahawks, bye week versus Texans versus Lions. Giants are 5-1. We don't have to get too much into the Jaguars game, but what will the Giants' record be going to Dallas Thanksgiving? They have 4 games. You calling 9-1, 8-2, 7-3?
I'm going to go 8-2. I think they'll stumble somewhere around there, along that way. And you know what? It could be against the Jaguars. I mean, it's you know, you, all you got to do every week in this league is to look at the scores, and every week you'll say, well, that doesn't make any sense. You look at a game and you look at 3 or 4 games and say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Maybe more than that. So I got to think along in these next 4. There'll be one where you think, I think the Giants should win this game, and they won't. I just think one of those is coming up. But obviously the opportunity when you look at the schedule is there for 9-1. If they play their best football, it's a possibility.
Oh, no doubt. I think they'll be 8-2. I think they'll lose in Seattle. Yes, the Seahawks are not very good. Geno Smith is playing pretty well, actually. Tough place to play, tough trip. I think that's the game they lose here. But the other ones, I think they'll win. We'll get to the predictions at the end, but just looking at like broadly, I mean, right now the Giants are, like I said, the 5th seed in the NFC, the top wild card. Cowboys are the 6th seed. Eagles are the 1st seed in the NFC, and of course the Jets, who we also cover, the 5th seed in the
You're
AFC.
the mecca of NFL football.
It's crazy. I mean, so that got me thinking today. Like, and I don't know if any of you folks out there have been thinking about this. Like, gee, like Well, the Eagles have been good, obviously, recently, but the Jets and Giants were tied for the worst record in the NFL over the last 5 years. So, when's the last time the Jets, Giants, and Eagles made the playoffs? So, I'll pause and see if people want to like write it down or think about it before I give the answer to that. Okay, so think about it. You already seen the answer here, Bob. So I would have
Yeah, I
asked
was
you.
going to give the people a hint and tell them to go to your Twitter account, but
I I was texting with one of our former writers about this, and he guessed one of the years, but it wasn't the most recent year. So it's happened 3 times: Jets, Giants, Eagles in the playoffs. Which, if the season ended today, which it doesn't, it would happen again. So those 3 times are 1981. I'm sure you remember that, Bob. Man, 81, yeah.
well,
Um,
I can tell you in 1981, the Eagles, I believe, started 6-0, and then went to. I was a freshman in college. Started 6-0, I think, and went to Miami. Ron Jaworski got beat up in Miami. They got crap beat out of him in Miami. The season went to hell from there, and they ended up losing a playoff game to the Giants.
You're
You can
right.
look
They
it up.
started 6-0. I was -1 that year, so I had to look that up. So they started 6-0. Yes. Then they lost their 7th game. That was in Minnesota. They did lose in Miami later in the year. So
Okay, Miami was later in the year, but then they lost to the Giants in the first round of the playoffs.
uh, it looks like they did. They lost 27-21 to the Giants that year in the playoffs. So the 3 years where the Jets, Giants, and Eagles have all made the playoffs: 1981, 2002, and 2006. And then there were 2 other times where the Jets and Giants were both in the playoffs, but not the Eagles. And that was 1985 and 1986, of course. The Giants winning the Super Bowl in '86, and those Jets had some pretty darn good teams in the mid '80s with the sack exchange and all
They
that.
did.
So, um, that just look. I mean, it's not hard to look it up. Let's be honest. The Jets don't have a lot of playoff appearances. I went and counted it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 playoff appearances, and then if you throw in the other 2 before the merger, but 12 since the merger, and then 68 and 69 too. The Jets were in the postseason, so that's where it's trending right now. I mean, you have the 4-2 Jets, the 5-1 Giants, and the 6-0 Eagles, who, by the way, all 3 are the only 3 unbeaten road teams in the league. Again, very early, but 3-0 Eagles on the road, 3-0 Jets on the road, coming off the big win in Green Bay, and 2-0 Giants on the road as they prepare to go to Jacksonville and then Seattle. So, uh, okay, so let's, like, if we're prognosticating broadly here with no consequence, how many of those 3 teams will make the playoffs?
Oh, I'm going to say the Eagles and Giants do, and the Jets don't. Although the Jets are talented. I mean, young and hungry. You know, so I mean, the possibility of all 3 of them making it is there for sure.
It
Um,
is, yeah.
I mean, they would make it if the season ended right now very easily. They would also be the 5th seed like the Giants. They're 4-2. Nobody else in second place is better than 3-2-1. So
Yep,
um,
both teams have the top wild card right now, and
right, right, and I think they might both be in the. They probably are both in the division that has the best team in their conference. Buffalo being the best team in the AFC, I think, and I think in football really, and the Eagles are the best team in the NFC, and probably the second best team in football right now.
yeah, that's a very good point. That both of these teams are probably going to have to quote unquote settle for the wild card, and of course, as we mentioned a bunch of times on here, like there's 3 wild cards now, and so. But I mean, as you look at the schedule, the Giants all along had a pretty favorable schedule with those winnable home games. I mean, the Giants go after Jacksonville, Seattle, we mentioned it. Texans and Lions, those are winnable. And then just looking at the other winnable games, they still get the Commanders twice. And of course, they still have to play some tough games. They get the Eagles twice, they get the Vikings, and the Colts are not a total pushover. And they have to play the Cowboys. So it's a balanced schedule, I think, down
Yeah,
the
the
stretch,
peak of their schedule comes after starting Thanksgiving. That's
for
when the real
sure.
teeth comes.
But except for those 2 games against the Commanders, and then they have to sweep those games. And um, so, look, I think in this schedule format, I think if you get to 10 or 11 wins, you have like a very, very good chance of making the playoffs. Certainly at 11-6. The Jets have a bit of a tougher schedule, I think, here. They do get to play Denver next week in Denver, but they still have to play the Bills twice. They still have to play the Patriots twice. They still have to play the Vikings. They still have to play the Dolphins. And so it's a little bit more of a perhaps a climb for the Jets. But I mean,
Yeah,
for,
the AFC East is really, after years of being the Patriots and nobody, it's might be the best division. The AFC East and NFC East, we can say it about both of them. Might be the two best divisions in the whole NFL.
it's remarkable. And so in a year when both the Jets and Giants are clearly better than they have been, they're going up against much stiffer competition in totality within their division than they have been. So it should make for great theater. And I tell you what, it's October 17th as we're talking, 2 weeks from Halloween. By this point in recent years, I would have checked that site Tankathon for draft position at, at least at least 3 or 4 or 5 times. I have not been to that site one time yet. And here we are talking wild card projections. It's a big change. No draft chatter, no aggregating of mock drafts. It's certainly a welcome change for Giant fans for the stuff that is the focus now, projecting playoff spots instead of projecting draft position. And all you could have asked, I think. I mean, and I don't know if you probably agree with this, like just even for the Jets, especially for the Jets, but for the Giants too, just be in the conversation with this extra wild card. If you can be in the conversation in late November, early December, like be relevant, right? I mean, maybe you don't make the playoffs, but for these teams, like that's all these fans necessarily wanted, and maybe the rest would be gravy.
Yeah, and it's just fun. It's just fun to have a good team, and it's more fun for us to go into a locker room and see a bunch of guys who feel good about what they're doing. I asked Daniel Jones yesterday. I said, "So when was the last time you had this much fun playing football?" And he just kind of laughed and he goes, "It's been a while for sure." But there's nothing more fun than winning. So I mean, that's for Daniel Jones. He doesn't really like to say much, but the fact he laughed and he's like, "Yeah, you know what? I'm having fun." Um, and he doesn't really show a lot of emotion, but for him, that was showing a little bit. Hey, winning! It's all about winning.
Yeah, and then he played at Duke, so I'd have to look at the records when he was there. But they had a couple good years. I don't know if those coincided with his years necessarily, but obviously he was.
I'm pretty sure they did.
Yeah, I think he won there. So, yeah, look, I mean, Daniel Jones won 3, 5, and 4 games in his starts in his first 3 years, and now he's 5-1 for the Giants in year 4, and perhaps everything that comes with that. But we've gotten into that, and we can get into it another time. But real quick here at the end, what's your prediction for Giants at Jaguars?
Well, I'm going to pick as I said, I'm convinced they're a good team. And if they're a good team, they should be able to go on the road and beat Jacksonville. And I think they will. But, all their games have been decided by one score. And I don't think that's going to change. So I'm going to pick the Giants 23-17.
Yeah, good pick. I like it. Another low scoring. I think I picked this past one, Ravens 21, Giants 20. So we were kind of like right there with the low scoring nature. I'll pick the Giants to win this game. This is one they should win. A good team goes and wins this game. I think the Giants are a good team. It's pretty clear at this point that they are at the very least a good team. Now whether they can finish here and make the final push they need to make the playoffs, we'll see. But I'll say Giants 24, Jaguars 17, and another close game, but perhaps one that doesn't unfold in a comeback type of situation. I think this is one where the Giants might be able to get out to a lead and have a little bit more control of the game for a longer stretch, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, we'll see. I know a few Giants fans who are making the trip down there. Nice time of year to be down in Jacksonville. Certainly a good time there. You're not far from the beach. So enjoy it if anyone is making the trip, and be sure to read and check out our stuff at NJ.com/Giants throughout this week. A lot to read about the surprising 5-1 Giants, and be sure to like, subscribe, review, rate us on all your podcasting platforms, and we will talk to you guys next week. Have a good one.